Hello everyone, and welcome to another film fight. If anyone remembers, my very first video was a battle between two very similar comic book movies, Batman v Superman coming from DC, and Captain America Civil War by Marvel. For this week, I'm bringing back the age-old rivalry by comparing another pair of very similar films. In 2011 came Captain America the First Avenger, and this year in 2017 came Wonder Woman. Both films are about superheroes who go to fight in a war in order to stop the vicious battle from engulfing the Earth. And it's also worth pointing out that both protagonists have shields, and the male leads are both named Steve. And oh my gosh, both Steves are played by a Chris, and they both sacrifice themselves in the end in a plane. Wow. So there are a lot of easy comparisons between the two movies. So which film with a Chris playing a Steve that fights in a war is better? Captain America or Wonder Woman? Let's take a look. Even though both are war movies, they tell two very unique stories. Captain America is, well, about Captain America. We follow Steve Rogers as a scrawny little man with tons of health problems who desperately tries to enlist over and over again to no avail. His persistence catches the attention of Dr. Erskine. He's refined his super serum and plans to use it to provide the Americans with an army of super soldiers to win the war. Because of his character, Dr. Erskine chooses Steve to become America's first super soldier. Steve is then transformed and goes from the malnourished toothpick that he was into a male model. After the serum is destroyed in a thwarted spy mission, and the death of Erskine, Steve is the only one who's granted with enhanced abilities and a couple more inches. With his newfound powers, Steve goes on to fight in the most treacherous front of the war, the home front. He spends the rest of the war putting on shows and selling bonds. The end. Now for Wonder Woman. Okay, just kidding. After getting mooned during one of his shows, Steve gets the help of Agent Peggy Carter and scientist Howard Stark to go behind enemy lines and rescue his friend Bucky and the rest of the 107th Division. Afterwards, Steve and the 107th fight in the European theater to take down Hydra, the Nazis' rogue science division that's become more of a cult. Hydra scientists Johann Schmidt and Arnim Zola learn how to harness the energy of the ancient Tesseract that was oh so important during Marvel's Phase 1 to create new weapons. Hydra then rushes to launch its weapons of mass destruction upon their foes before their oncoming downfall as the Allies and Cap push closer and take down more of their facilities. The whole movie is pretty much a flashback being told after Captain America is discovered in the ice, getting buried and frozen after intentionally crashing Hydra's aircraft from which they would launch the weapons. So that's the basic premise of the film. It's what you'd expect from a Captain America movie. Steve gets powers and fights Hydra. But does it do the story well? Heck yeah! It's very well paced, has a fun tone, and no aspects of the film are glanced over. We get just the right amount of everything, and plenty of fantastic scenes and set pieces, like when Steve gets beaten up, the spy chase, when he's rescuing the 107th, the train fight, and the climax. Okay, how many times am I going to mention a train fight in a film? This should be a new drinking game. Every time I mention a fight on a train, take a shot. You'll be wasted in no time. I also love the foreshadowing. When Steve gets beaten up behind the theater, he takes a garbage can lid and uses it to shield himself from the punches. And later when Steve's chasing the Hydra spy, he takes the car door that has a star in the middle of it and uses it to block the gunfire. So the story of the First Avenger was excellently done. Now for Wonder Woman. Before I start, I just want to say, I give no dungs that it's about a woman. I'm not going to praise this movie at all just for that. I frankly don't care, and being a woman doesn't give her any more leverage over the straight white male from Brooklyn. And I'd like to point out that we've had female leads in DC movies before. We just don't like to talk about it. So objectively, how is the story of Wonder Woman? Well, it's good too. Obviously it revolves around Wonder Woman, aka Diana Prince, the daughter of Zeus. Diana lives with the Amazon women whose goal is to prevent Ares from destroying humanity through war. She gets trained by her aunt, I'm not even going to try to pronounce these names, to become the most epic Amazon. Soon after, a plane crash lands on the shores of their island. Yeah, just read that. Diana goes to save the pilot Steve. Not Steve Rogers, the ripped one, but Steve Trevor.
Where would we walk? Where would we run? If we could stay all day in the sun, just you and me, and I could be part of your world.
So Steve is a British guy who's carrying important intelligence on a secret new gas the Germans are developing to get an edge before the Treaty of Versailles is signed. After the Germans shoot up the island, Diana and Steve go on a trip to the war front because she believes that German General Ludendorff is Ares trying to destroy humanity through World War I. No, I said Ludendorff, not Ganondorf. Better. So first they head to London to bring the information to the British leaders. Behind closed doors, British negotiator and war leader Sir Patrick Morgan funds Diana and Steve to go to Germany to assemble a crew of soldiers and stop the use of the new mustard gas being developed. So the heroes go on their way to defeat Ares and save the world. Like the First Avenger, all of this is being told in a flashback, being seen by Diana after given a picture of her and her crew by Bruce Wayne. So which war story is better? Well, they're both good stories that are definitely worth telling, but overall, I think Captain America has a better third act and an awesome ending as Steve realizes that he's woken up in the future. Well, our present. Wonder Woman has something of a twist ending that falls pretty short. I'll talk about it a bit later, but the third act wasn't as solid as the rest of it. Meanwhile, Captain America stayed awesome the whole way through. The characters in both movies are very upstanding people who want to save the world from Germans. Wonder Woman, like I previously mentioned, is the daughter of Zeus and was made to kill Ares. She's very focused, always on the task at hand, kill Ares, stop the war, and save humanity. Diana also gets to show her compassion for people when she crosses no man's land to free a village from German control. She starts the movie very naive, believing that some people are all good and some are all bad. Diana doesn't realize the grays of war. Yeah, many times people like to paint the Allies as the good guys and the Central Powers as the bad guys, but war's more complicated than that, which she learns over time. Well, kinda. Something that's upsetting is that she still ends the movie pretty naive, believing that hate is the cause of all war and suffering, and that love is mankind's only hope. It's almost like World War I didn't teach her anything. War is more complicated than that. There are so many factors that go into declaring a war, such as resources, nationalism, sectionalism, self-determination, ideology. War can't be boiled down to love and hate, like Diana seems to think by the end. Besides that, there's still a lot to like about her. She gets a lot of funny scenes from being a fish out of water in 1918 London. She has no idea what Western culture is like, so she does things like carrying a sword through the streets. The other main character is not Jacked Steve, played by Chris Pine, who's excellent in this. I mean, he's no Chris Evans. But he's alright. Steve Trevor also gets his fish out of water moments when he becomes stranded on that and is the only man there. Why on earth would he want to go back to the war? He has a whole island of women to himself. Anyways, yeah, he's an American spying for the British. Him and Diana bounce off each other very well. The two get a lot of laughs as they learn more about each other's worlds, like in the scene when they're sailing to London and Steve tries to explain why he wasn't going to sleep next to her, and when they're clothes shopping. The side characters are good too, like Steve's secretary and his friends that join him along the way. They're well acted and get some laughs too. Probably the biggest hurdle for Captain America was making an old-fashioned, perfectly upstanding man seem interesting and relatable for modern audiences. But at the end of the day, the film got this down perfectly. Steve Rogers is definitely the best part of the MCU, and it's probably what keeps the audience coming. What's great about Steve is that the man came before the powers. He's a true patriot, constantly trying to enlist in the army, even though he's extremely ill-looking. He even goes as far as to create new identities to keep enlisting with. He wants to help that much. And even though he gets picked on a lot and winds up in fights, he never runs away, but stands his ground. We also see this later in the sequels. Steve's always willing to fight for what's right, even if it's not even a fight and he's just getting beaten down. But as he puts it, I can do this all day. His heart and character are why he's chosen to be the first super soldier. You can't just give that kind of power to any man, so Steve is a very inspiring figure. I also like his friendship with Bucky. We're not just told about them being friends, or told a story about their past. No, we get to see their friendship, and it's very believable. Bucky Barnes isn't as passionate as Steve, but he's still a good friend, sticking up for him when he gets into trouble, and trying to hook him up with a date. But of course, Steve is awkward around girls, and doesn't seem to be looking for just anybody. As he puts it, he's waiting for the right partner. And that would be Agent Carter, or Peggy as she's called. Or maybe it's her great niece later, but for now it's Agent Carter, a British agent who works with General Phillips, played by Tommy Lee Jones. Phillips is played by Tommy Lee Jones, not Peggy, because that would be a really strange casting choice. But still not as strange as the new Flash Thompson. After the death of Erskine, Peggy acts as almost Steve's anchor, as she helps and guides him throughout the war against Hydra. Even though she's a woman, she shows herself to be more than capable, sort of like Wonder Woman. Carter's of course Steve's love interest, and if there's one gripe I have with these characters, is some unnecessary drama between them after Steve becomes a war hero. Another woman gives Steve a kiss, and she sees and gets upset. Agent Carter's great and all, but this didn't need to be here. So, which characters are better? Both movies certainly have more ups and downs when it comes to the characters, but I'd certainly take the character of Captain America over Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman certainly has good character moments and uses the fish out of water aspect really well, but by the end Diana still comes across as naive and ill-informed, giving what sounds like a beauty pageant speech at the end. Steve Rogers, on the other hand, had the whole noble hero who wants to help aspect of Wonder Woman, and then some. He's a true patriot who shows that he's willing to fight for what's right with or without the powers. And I mentioned some of the humor in Wonder Woman, but the First Avenger has just as much, if not more, and it's more subtle too. It doesn't need a small scene devoted to Diana eating ice cream for the first time to get a laugh. There are a lot of small, yet clever jokes and one-liners, like Bucky's response to seeing Steve after being transformed. You get a lot of character-to-character interaction and little subtle quips. You don't need a big joke. The villain in the First Avenger is pretty much the only Captain America villain anyone seems to care about, the Red Skull. He goes by Johann Schmidt for the first half of the movie. I mentioned foreshadowing before, but it's really cool when it comes to the Red Skull. For the first half, we don't actually see what he looks like. He wears a mask over his disfigured face that he got after taking an early version of Erskine's serum. In his first scene when he gets the Tesseract, he shoots one of its keepers and the blood gets on the skull of his Hydra symbol. Later, when German scientist Arnim Zola comes to speak with Schmidt, he sees him without the mask, but he's silhouetted. At the moment, he's getting a portrait of him painted, and what we see on the palette are different shades of red. So yeah, good foreshadowing. Red Skull's plan is to harness the power of the Tesseract to create new weapons for Hydra, and ultimately weapons of mass destruction to take out his opponents, including the Nazis, whose shadow he's grown tired of. Hydra goes from Advanced Nazi Science Division to a cult led by the Red Skull. And again, there's Arnim Zola, who's the greatest scientist at the time. He works with Red Skull, and is the one who learned how to harness the power of the Tesseract for weapons. Overall, I'm not going to claim that they're some of the best villains in the genre, but they're good and serve their parts well. No complaints there. The villains in Wonder Woman are admittedly meh. Diana spends the whole film hunting down Ares, who she believes is the German General Ludendorff, along with the scientist Dr. Maru, who's creating a new mustard gas that destroys gas masks, and leaves the wearer unprotected. After killing Ludendorff, she discovers that he wasn't actually Ares. It's that guy from London, Sir Patrick Morgan. I like that a Brit is actually the villain, because it shows how war isn't as black and white as many would like to believe. But it's not delivered all that well. It's not one of those twists that make your jaw drop. It's just one of those meh ones. There are some parts that I thought were good, like that instead of being some grand and obvious enemy pulling all the strings to keep the war going, he's just a subtle voice that plants ideas in people's heads. The people themselves are causing the war. He just gives them that little push, like pointing Dr. Maru in the right direction to take with creating the gas. So the villains in Wonder Woman aren't bad at all, but they're merely serviceable. Once again, I have to give it to Captain America, the First Avenger. Primarily, Wonder Woman is about war and human nature. I already mentioned this before. Diana, over time, learns that people are never all good or all bad. Everyone has the potential to make good and bad decisions, and even she does. There can be good people who do bad things, or bad people who do good things every now and then. The same thing goes for nations like Britain and Germany. And for example, everyone hates the Nazis of course, cause they did horrendous things, but they still contributed many scientific discoveries and invented Fanta, hashtag not sponsored. So I enjoyed that part, but immediately after Diana monologues about coming to that realization, she goes back to her black and whites by saying that hate causes war and only love can save the world. So maybe she learned something about people, but she still comes across as extremely naive when it comes to the nature of war. And it's not one of those things where I simply disagree with the movie. No, Wonder Woman is just flat out being dumb. I don't think I have to go any further into this. On to Captain America. One of the most prevalent themes in the First Avenger is strength. This is discussed frequently between Dr. Erskine and Steve. Steve's strength isn't in the physical, but in his heart. Physically, he's literally a twig. General Phillips wanted Erskine to test the serum on some of his most in-shape men, but Erskine wanted a man who didn't have the physical strength, because he'll value it more and be more humble once he receives it, knowing what it's like to be a weakling. So Steve already had the moral and mental strength, so it would only be right to award him with the physical. I like how Erskine said that the serum only amplifies what's already there, so when the Red Skull takes it, he becomes physically a monster as well as morally. Another theme is standing up for what's right. Now you might say that this is a common theme among all superhero films, but it's especially present here. Even without his powers, Steve stood up to the heckler in the movie theater who booed an advertisement for helping the war effort, even amidst who I can only assume are widows who are crying at the sight of it. Even through constant punishment and adversity, Steve's never afraid to stand up for others. Another example of this is when he quit selling bonds on stage in order to save the 107th Division and Bucky amongst them. Against Philip's wishes and Peggy's advice, Steve goes deep into enemy territory alone. So, if it wasn't obvious by now, Captain America wins this round. I'm going to have to mention the train fight again, aren't I? Okay guys, take another shot. There's plenty of great action throughout Captain America. I mean, what's there left to say that needs saying? There are so many great and memorable scenes. Steve trying to fight, him in training, the chase scene, the epic Hitler fight, the rescue, the train sequence. Of course, the climax, and the big reveal at the end. I'll admit, some of the action isn't as epic as the sequels, but it's still good. There are great moments in Wonder Woman 2, like the initial fight with the Germans on that, the Superman-esque fight in the alley, the No Man's Land scene, the fight in the village, and even though I think the fight with Ares is merely okay, Steve's self-sacrifice is well done. I think the hand-to-hand combat in Wonder Woman is shot better, and her accompanying soundtrack is still riveting. That was the only good thing about Batman v Superman. The problem is that a lot of the action scenes are done in slow motion. Just why? If all the slow-mo was converted to normal speed, the runtime would be halved. Slow motion can be done well, if used sparingly, but it's so overdone here. As far as the action goes, it's pretty close. If it weren't for the overuse of the slow-mo and the lackluster finale, I'd probably give it to Wonder Woman. I'm just gonna call it a tie. Both have some great scenes. I think Wonder Woman reached higher highs and has a cool battle theme, but the advantage gets negated by slow-mo abundance and a weak finale, so a tie for this category. So, if you can't tell, I enjoy both movies. Captain America is the best Phase 1 Marvel movie, only being surpassed by its sequels and maybe Doctor Strange in my opinion, and Wonder Woman is easily the best film to come out of the DCEU. You can practically call it the only real film to come out of that garbage dump. But which superhero war film with a Steve, played by a Chris, is better? Captain America the First Avenger or Wonder Woman? The winner is Captain America. I find that it has a more inspiring protagonist, much better themes, and doesn't feel the need to go at a quarter speed all the time. I also prefer its more subtle and quippy humor to the blatant and obvious jokes in Wonder Woman. To sum it up, Captain America is Wonder Woman on steroids. Evil scientist villains, but better. A noble superhero that wants to do the right thing, but better. A secret agent love interest, but okay, Wonder Woman is better in that aspect. Although, that one final scene between Peggy and Cap was heartbreaking. Oh my goodness. It was a pretty close call at first, but after rewatching both of them, Captain America holds up really well. So congratulations to the First Avenger. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. See you next week.